We wanted to create a fun, non-judgmental space where women can talk about their shared experiences.
Here, we will normalize the challenges we face as females living in a society that dictates unrealistic and outdated expectations on what a woman should be.
Together, we hope to cultivate a supportive community of women who empower one another to courageously live unapologetically.
A quick disclaimer before we get started. Although Cindy and Danielle are licensed therapists, this podcast is not to be interpreted as therapy or a replacement of therapeutic services. It is strictly a conversation between two women about their experiences in the world. If you liked today's episode, please make sure to like and subscribe below. Also, follow us on all of our social media platforms at Unapologetically Females. With that being said, we hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome back to another episode. We are here today with a very special guest in honor of Teacher Appreciation Week coming up in a couple days. We are here with the famous Mrs. Christine Barnes. We're excited to have her. As we've been talking about this episode, Cindy, for a while. We were like, we want to do a Teacher Appreciation Week episode, and you always were the first to come to mind.
Well, thank you for having me in my most favorite place, able to talk about my most favorite thing.
Yes.
The reason that I've talked about you and you were the person that came to mind first was I think we all have someone in our lives, like a teacher in our life, that person in our life that you remember and that has made a difference. Mm-hmm. I would say for me, my mom in particular, my mom's a teacher and she has been the most impactful in my life. But Harper has been, she's third grade now. She's been in, preschool through third. And we've met a lot of teachers, and you have had such a profound impact on her life and even on our family's life, just how you've loved her and treated her, and how that's just how you are with your students in general. And you can ask any parent, they all just sing your praises. So
that's good to hear.
It's you come highly recommended.
I have a hard time letting go of them when they leave kindergarten.
I know.
So
yes, but it's
always
amazing.
Their champion forever.
You are. So. You really are. There's something special you do. I don't know if you still do. I'm assuming you do, but you write a letter to all your students at the end of the year for them to open on their high school graduation.
I love that.
We still have Harper sealed. You know how many times I'm like, I just want to open it.
Just want to see what it says.
That's such a cool tradition.
And I cry a lot as I'm writing them for each of them and thinking, of how many years they have to go, and is it going to be challenging for them, or you only wish the best success, and you pray that they're going to go on and do all good things.
Yes. Well, we still have that letter, and every so often I'm tempted, but I haven't done it.
Don't do it.
I know Joe hid it from me because he's like, you're not going to be the one to open it.
Right.
No, we're waiting for Harper. So, but let's go back to you being a kid and how did I'm assuming teachers that love teaching, I feel like they grew up going, I'm going to be a teacher. Was that the case for you?
That was the case for me. I had a little playroom in my house, and I had a chalkboard on my wall, and I played school, all the time. That the teachers knew I wanted to be a teacher, so they'd give me all their old worksheets to bring home. So, they must have known something about me even back then. So, I would play school all the time with my dolls, and then once my brother came along, he became my student, like it or not. And then it was just something that I just always wanted to do.
You were made for it. You were born for it.
My mom had worked in the school. She wasn't a teacher, but she was a teaching assistant. So, having her in the schools, that sort of gave me a little, I was able to be there at certain times that, I wouldn't, the other kids didn't get to be there. Yeah. So that increased my excitement for it even more. And it wasn't until I was in high school and I took a working with children's classroom where, they have a little preschool that comes in, and that was probably, she was probably that person, Mrs. Rosenberg. She, she said, no, this is right for you. This is what you need to do. And so I went on. I went to school. I went to college for teaching, and I got hired right out of right out of college, my student teaching experience, I ended up finishing the year out before I was even graduated. The teacher had to go on maternity leave. So we're going to keep you right there. And so I got to finish out that school year and then start again the next year. And it's just been the same ever since. 33 years. So.
33 years you've been teaching.
I took a couple of years off to be home with my own kids. You know, it's hard when you're a teacher and you know the value of having moms around and being, you know, engaged with your own children. So I wanted to make sure, that she got off to a really good start. So I took 3 years off. So
okay.
Yes.
So where are you from? Arizona?
No, I went to college and started in New Jersey.
Okay.
That's where I grew up. And then when I got married, my husband was military. So I had the opportunity of teaching on military bases. I taught English in Korea for a little bit.
Wow.
And then when we came back to the States, it was primarily, and has always been preschool through about 3rd grade. I did do a little bit with, my degree is in special education. So I started off, I have 17 years in special education, and that's sort of my love. I love those that kind of need that little extra push and, that someone there to champion for them.
That takes such patience.
I did that for 17 years, and then I moved into, doing elementary school. So.
So did you choose kindergarten, or were you placed in kindergarten? And
I chose kindergarten. I was actually, when I moved here to come to Quartz Hill, the principal at the time, my other children were here, and the principal had said, "We need you on board. We have a kindergarten spot." So I was like, "Okay, I'll take it." Yeah, so it was perfect.
And you've been in kinder your whole time here?
My whole time here at Quartz Hill, yeah.
Wow. How many years have you been at this school?
So I've been here for 13 years.
Wow.
In fact, my first kindergarten group is getting ready to open their letters.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
so exciting.
Yes, I'm going to go over into their to watch their graduation.
Oh, that's amazing.
now, have you always done that, the letters, or was that something that just started?
I've always pretty much have done it while I taught this kind of younger age group.
Gotcha.
Even preschool. When I did preschool for so many years, I usually wrote something out for them, just so they had something to keep.
That's
So
amazing.
Hopefully, they have that small piece of time that we've been together.
Right.
And you want them to kind of think back about it and like, hey, think about that year and look how far I've come and all of that.
Yeah.
I love that. I feel like I remember my kindergarten teacher vaguely, but I feel like because of the little things that you have done, and I think people stay connected to you. I feel like you're so connected to past.
And social media has helped a lot
I'm
with that.
sure.
Facebook, I'm able to watch them still grow up.
Yeah.
Even if they've moved on from, the Gilbert Public Schools, I'm still able to kind of follow them if they've moved out of the state or whatever.
That makes sense.
That has been really nice.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go back. So you were in Jersey, then you traveled around, taught with your husband, you landed here. When did you guys land in Arizona?
We came to Arizona in 2000.
Okay.
We were in Tucson first, so I taught preschool special ed there for several years. And then 2011, we moved up here to Gilbert.
Okay. And you have how many kids?
I have 4 kids. My daughter is my biological, and she actually teaches kindergarten up in Scottsdale.
Oh, okay.
So
It's a genetic thing.
Yeah.
You guys are just born to do this.
Well, that means that she looked up to you and emulated you. Yeah.
And my most proud thing with her is she was named Teacher of the Year for her school several years ago. So that meant more to me than, with your kids.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't ever have to win that award. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
it's like
it means
got
so much
it,
more
and
when
that
they win
yes.
it. Yeah.
So I have her. She's our biological. And then in 2007, we adopted 3 kids from the foster care system.
Okay.
So at that time, they were 6, 3, and 18 months.
Wow.
And now, of course, they're in their 20s. So, yes.
Wow. How long were you guys fostering for?
Well, we went into it with the intent of adopting. So, we went to a match party, found a family that had their rights had already been on the process of being severed. So I didn't have to do all those visitations and everything because, as I said, I have a hard time giving up. So my students, who I only get a couple hours, it's even worse when they're living in your home.
Sure.
we brought them in. There were lots of challenges with that, and huge learning curve. And it was nice being in the school at that time because I was able to make sure that they needed a whole bunch of supports, just, in all areas. So I was able to, help them with all of that and stuff and move them through. So
what was the driving force to go into foster care and adoption? And
my husband was unable to have kids, and we had said when we turned 40, if we hadn't had another one, then there, just some fertility challenges that we were going to go and adopt. And at first we were like, oh, let's do the whole China adoption. And we went and we were looking into that, and we thought, you know what? There are so many kids here in Arizona, and that. Let's do it. Let's do it here. And we went with the intent of adopting a little girl, one, possibly two.
Came out with three.
They were a sibling group.
Okay.
And just like the students, you see them and you just instantly know that they're perfect for our family.
Oh,
so
that's amazing.
Wow.
That's my
And now they're in their 20s. You said all of them are grown.
all of them are grown.
Wow.
Successful, loving, and
Wow. That's amazing.
That is an awesome
So
story.
they all went through this school.
they all went through here.
Okay. I feel like there's so much value. So my mom was at our school in middle school when my brother and I were, she was my brother's teacher at one point because his Spanish teacher, this poor guy, I still remember him. I just think the class was hard. You rotate though in middle school. So it was, I don't know if all the classes were hard, but I just think some of the classes were hard. And he just, I don't know if middle school was for him.
It was a tough year, so.
He got up and walked out in the middle of class. He was done. Yeah,
Wow.
you remember. And then they hired my mom to take his position.
Oh, wow. Middle school is a tough,
Yeah.
tough.
So, my mom taught middle school her whole career until she retired.
That takes a special
Well, I take that back.
takes a special person.
She started off in elementary in the, what was it, Zito school district. So, like, Phoenix, like, really tough school district. And, I mean, I remember hearing stories of, there was some wild things that happened at that school. It was really sad. It was unfortunate. But,
That
so
was
then
back then. Think how much times have changed and how much more has come onto the table. So.
Yeah.
Just like the crime even around the school was a lot. It was a lot. But yeah, then she walked into our school and taught. Not
Did you
only
ever
at
have
our
her?
school, I didn't. My brother did.
Okay.
So he was in her class that year, and I want to say she only taught at our middle school that year, if I remember correctly. But that was always an interesting, dynamic. So being there with your mom on campus,
Yes.
from my
Yes.
brother, very different.
Right.
And he still said, she didn't even give me an A.
I just had this conversation with my youngest because I used to substitute teach, and she would tell me, you are not allowed to substitute in any of my classes. So if something would pop up, I'd be like, wait, what is her schedule?
Yeah.
No, I can't be in that class.
No,
Yes,
exactly.
yeah. So
Exactly. Well, and sometimes I could be out there, so the kids would just roll my own children would just roll their eyes like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Mom's doing that.
Well, I would run into you guys sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rita was there too, but yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And it never happened. You somehow always
No, I
avoided
made
it?
sure I didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in teaching in my community where I live and where I
Right.
shop and everything, everything I do takes twice as long because
For sure.
now that I've been teaching here for so long,
Yeah.
it's like no matter where I go, I run into somebody.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I'm
totally
sure.
get that.
Yeah.
I'm sure, yeah. So having that experience with your kids here, how was that? I'm sure you said they rolled your eyes. Did they ever, you didn't ever teach them, right?
I never taught them. No.
Okay, okay. So they, overall, was a good experience, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. It was definitely a positive experience. It allowed me to have connections with the teachers that others may
Right.
not have. Allowed me, like I said, they struggled. So especially with the boys, girls are
Right.
real communicative,
Sure,
but communicative. But the boys, you find out 3 days later that you needed this poster.
Right, fair.
I would walk
Podcast
down
to
the
come on that.
hallways and be like, oh, there's my son's backpack and water bottle that he left. So it was I felt like I was mom. I was mom, though. I mean, you're always mom 24 hours a day, but I was mom at the same time, as I was a teacher. So, some days it was challenging. And, you'd bring them to school and they'd be hanging out in the classroom and all you want to do is set up. So there was never any of that kind of down, peace and quiet kind of time.
I was just thinking that. How did you get time to yourself?
That was the hardest part. You had to kind of make time. Yeah. And, unfortunately, if they had to stay home sick, I had at least that car ride in for a few minutes and the car ride home. But you had to just kind of find that time, and we were invested here as a family. So we were all at all the activities we did together, which made things a little bit easier because we weren't running. It wasn't until they got into everyone was in a different school that it became, we had to go to this school for this one and that school for this one. But for from almost 6 years, we were able to all be together in the same place. So Night of the Arts was the same for all of us.
Right.
So that freed up some scheduling a little bit too.
Sure.
So,
And you were all driving to the same place.
Yes.
And,
So that makes sense.
And I have a wonderful husband that really
sounds
helps.
like it. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I'm curious. You've been doing this for so long. The landscape has changed
Tremendously.
and so I'm curious. From when you started, walk me through what are the differences over the years? What have you seen evolve?
Kindergarten itself has evolved. In kindergarten before, you would see a little kitchen area in the classroom and easels.
That's
and
just preschool now.
All of that sort of stuff, and that's preschool now. And the demands that are put on kids are so much greater. So much greater. Yeah. It's also very different because we have more working parents than we've ever had before. So that changes the dynamics of everything. Kids are stretched very thin. So, you want to use that 7 hours a day or so that you have them. You want to get the best out of them for their education. And then they're still going home to sometimes lots of activities, sometimes unfortunately to no one or nothing. And so that has changed. It's changed the way we teach, what kind of things we do. Social media has played a huge role in how we do things. Because kiddos are put on social media very early.
Yes.
Seeing
like
parents,
their own accounts.
Not so much even that. Just you're in the grocery store and you see that mom and that the 2-year-olds playing with mom's phone as they're pushing them around, so they're used to that immediacy of everything.
Yes. iPad babysitting.
Yes, exactly. They're constant that. Before years ago, you would go to a restaurant and they'd have the placemats with all the little mazes on them and the word searches.
And
exactly. So you would sit there while you were waiting for food. Now it's these little digital game things that you can change. That alone has evolved and has changed the way our kids' brains work, the way everything, just developmentally everything. And I think I mentioned I was going to be a grandparent pretty soon.
Yes.
And so I've been looking at all these baby toys for him. And even the baby toys for them all do 100 different things. They bounce, they crawl, they make music. The stimulation, even at that age, it's, we've lost that. Let's just sit in let's sit, let's read a book. Let's let's do nursery rhymes. Let's sing songs. So all of that has changed. So because of that, teachers have had to change. We can't just say, well, that's not the way it's done, and we need to change. But that's why we have to be more animated. We have to have quicker pace, and we have to kind of change the things that we do in the classroom.
How about kids' imaginations? Have you seen a change in that as well?
Huge decline in imagination. Huge decline in motor skills because they used to, color and cut and do all those kind of things at home. Now they're coming into school and, they expect to be able to push everything on a button from an iPad screen or a phone. They're not playing with toys the same way, where you used to put out a bunch, I still do, because I'm having to actually sit and model to them how to play with these dinosaurs, how to do those things. So it's so sad that so many of those things have been taken out of a kindergarten program because we can't model those same kind of how to play restaurant. I mean, I grew up playing restaurant. You would pretend you were taking someone's order.
You grew up playing teacher.
Yes, all of those kind of things have sort of since diminished. And So that has changed a lot. The demands on kids have changed a whole bunch. And it's twofold. We want our kids to grow up and, compared to other nations, be academically way above. But we're also, sometimes you see we're creating a lot of anxiety amongst kids,
Absolutely.
even as young as kindergarten. I say,
preschool,
we have two different things. We have an accelerated class here, which is fabulous, and it's a certain kind of kiddo that is in an accelerated class. Sure. They're very competitive. They're more driven. They think a different way. Our other classes are conventional, and they're more your typical kids, where you give them a chance to be a leader, give them a chance to shine amongst their peers and all of that sort of thing. So it's just a total different kind of process. Even the way I have parent-teacher conferences are different. Before they just wanted to know, is their child being a good person? Is their child, do they have friends? Are they nice? Are they kind? Now, one year I had someone ask me what their child's class rank was in kindergarten. You get all kinds, and that's not typical, but you get all kinds of things, and those kind of kids are going to be really pushed and really driven, and they're forced to make decisions a lot earlier. By the time you went through middle school, by the time they're in middle school, it's kind of like they need to know what kind of path they're going to be on. Are they going to be on a sports path? Are they going to be on an orchestra path? Are they going to go down the arts path? And they really haven't had a time to even explore some of those things.
And a lot of them don't choose it for themselves,
No,
I work with a lot of teens in my practice, and I see exactly what you're talking about, And
and like my son was my oldest son. He sort of like was in that COVID kind of track. He graduated in 2020, so he never had the true graduation. But what's interesting is all he wanted to do was play football. And he played football his entire time. He was in high school. All of his classes revolved around football, weightlifting, and all these sort of things. He never had that opportunity to ever explore anything else he might be good at because he was so into football.
Right.
God bless him, he was accepted into college for football, but because of COVID, they never started their year. So with football, unless you're keeping up with all of that, so he never got to play. And then it's like, okay, well now what am I going to do? Where he never had that opportunity to try other things. And so that's a classic case of how we push our kids in certain directions, which may not be, the same thing in education is also doing that, and that's the way we're,
That brings up two thoughts for me. One, I don't think that we are talking enough about how much COVID affected our kids. And how we're now experiencing the backlash of that.
Very much so.
And then also, I can imagine that your social work skills have probably had to increase and improve when you're explaining some of what you're explaining about, both parents working and things like that.
This school year is the first school year that we're kind of over that COVID hump for my kindergartners.
Okay.
Prior to this, most of them never had any preschool experience.
Right.
Because they stayed home. Their preschools were closed or whatever. So their skills were, unfortunately, really delayed. A few years ago, they would have been right on track. But with the expectations of kindergarten changing, we had a lot of, making up to do. So this is the first year that they did have preschool. They came in more ready to learn, more ready for that sort of thing. So that was one way. With my, I remember that year when, we went out and, the whole time as teachers were thinking, oh, we're going to go back, we're going to go back, we're going to go back. And they had us come in and pack up our classrooms. We had like 30 minutes to come in, pack everything up. We couldn't stay, we were all in gloves and masks. And I remember walking in and it was probably the beginning of May, and I saw my March calendar still up. It was almost like time stood still.
Right.
It was sort of like time stood still.
Like a strange movie.
And it was a really weird sensation. And then we came back and we were doing the whole online thing. And, for the primary grades, that was really tough.
Really tough.
I mean, it was tough for everybody.
Sure.
Which
tough for the parents.
Which put everybody back again. And there was less accountability. So because of that less accountability, our upper grades, it's really struggled. We're struggling having them get homework done. We're struggling. I know upper grades attendance is really poor, like high
Right.
school and everything,
Right.
because they got so used to just staying home. And I can turn this in, I can turn this in a couple weeks, it's okay. And
Well, and assignments went online too,
Yes.
so they just have to turn it in by midnight. So
Right.
I don't need to go to school because I just need to
I
turn
just
in my
need to
stuff by
turn
midnight.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it was, it's really hard. And even sitting, with my own teacher group of moms, and we all have kids about the same age. And I mean, at first you think, oh, it's just you, it's just my kid. What am I doing wrong? And I'm a teacher,
right,
and but you sit there and they're like, Joey wouldn't go to school today, or so it's that same. We're all kind of going through that same thing. And now that they've graduated, and I have one that's in jobs. It's the same kind of thing.
Yes.
Well, they don't have that same accountability for jobs either.
No, it's hard to
find. They've given me, it's okay. I get 20 points before I get fired, kind of thing. And so that sort of thing, socially, emotionally, we've removed a lot of that thing.
They've lost some of their in-person social
aside from
skills.
the academics.
Right, right. The in-person social, I can imagine the interviewing's different now for that generation, and yeah, just trying to find, for them, trying to find a career that feels comfortable for them. And then for those who are hiring, trying to find somebody that's willing to come and show up.
Exactly. I think that's why all of these, local businesses still are looking for people because the turnover rate is so high amongst that, that group that usually worked in restaurants and things like that. They're the ones who are like so used to saying, no, I don't have to go, kind of thing. And that's unfortunate. My 3 kids were in high school during COVID. My oldest son graduated, but he had all 4 years to go through and build friendships and relationships, and he was part of the football team. And even since, when they were in college, they all still got together. So he has that core group of friends and high school memories, even though he didn't have a prom and that sort of thing, he still had 4 good solid years of memories. Where my daughter's 2 years younger than him, and she lost all that. She lost a lot of those, when she did have, grad night and all those kind of things, we're like, aren't you going? She didn't have that same connection to friends or anything because she got right into high school and they were online. So they, unless you were in part of an activity or something, they lost that opportunity to make friends.
I can't imagine being a freshman and being online and then showing up in person and you don't know any of these people in person, you've just seen their faces on Zoom.
Yes.
Yeah,
So that was,
really hard.
that's, and to this day she has no connection still to high school or to, she has like 1 or 2 friends and girls are usually the most social. So, but that was interesting. And like I said, there's a group of us and who all had kids the same age and their kids were doing the same, experiencing the same things. So I knew it wasn't, we weren't the oddity out there. We were more the norm. So.
It's so interesting that you say that about, I mentioned before that I long-term subbed in kindergarten when we first went back for COVID, and none of those kids had been to preschool either. And a lot of what I did was just teaching them to sit in their chair, raise their hand, sit in circle time. A lot of them had never worked with scissors. Or their crayons were, they would cut their clothes, they would break their crayons, all the things that you learn in preschool. It was really like teaching preschool. So so there was definitely some things I would feel like as a kindergarten teacher that you experienced even more so than some of the other teachers in those years of COVID.
Yes, absolutely. And then having them, having to be animated and like a TV show when you're on the computer to keep them engaged because, their dog is running around, or they're watching mom over in the corner cooking and they want their snack or something. So, having them get used to that situation. And then when we brought them back, I love the classroom situation at the younger levels where, everything's tables, so there's more group work, there's more, they're able to be more social in that sense. But during COVID, we had desks in here, and we went from, because they had to be so far apart, we went from right where we're sitting all the way to the very back. And, we had to walk up and down aisles. They couldn't eat in the cafeteria. So they didn't learn that skill of just how to be in a cafeteria for 2 years within a school environment. And, all that sort of thing that just is typical school, even at elementary level, was kind of skewed. Fortunately, they have a lot more time to
Right.
pick it up and regroup. So
I remember even some schools had like partitions, plastic partitions between every desk. So I can imagine these kiddos like feeling almost like they're in a spaceship or something,
Yes, and like everybody had their own, usually we play with the toys. Everybody had their own set of Legos at their table. Everybody had their own Play-Doh at their table.
Masks required?
Masks were required, when we came back.
Okay.
And the second year,
How was that for kindergartners? Like, I mean, how do
do
you
you know what? I could sell them on anything.
Of course you could.
We were the best superheroes.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that you did.
Of
Kindergarten's
course
easy.
you made it fun.
Kindergarten's
Oh,
easy. It
yeah.
was, the fifth and sixth graders who had the harder
Yeah,
time,
sure.
or the fourth grade boys who were holding it up on their heads and stuff.
Yep.
Kindergarten was easy, so it
Okay.
seems like it would be hard, but we could sell them on anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, how fun. Superheroes.
Anything we
Of
came up with,
course. Of
whatever
course.
the day
Yeah.
was. We washed our hands. I never
Yeah.
washed
Oh,
our
yeah.
hands so many times.
sure.
Because we had to wash our hands. We washed our hands 9 times a day.
Yeah.
And you had this long line of everybody washing their hands, and they would all put their little hands out, and you'd give them 2 scoops of soap, and they'd start lathering
Yeah.
before they got to the sink.
Oh,
and,
wow.
So that's how
Yeah.
that changed for a little while.
Right.
And now, fortunately, we're back into the norm
Thank goodness.
of a school environment, not so much the whole academic
Right.
and playing catch up with that.
Right.
But it's looking better. It definitely is
Yeah,
looking much
that's
better.
good. That's hopeful.
Well,
right?
now we have
That's-
AI doing their homework, though.
Yes,
so
I was just going to say that. And now we have AI.
I know.
That's how they're doing their interviews. They're
Yep,
just
that's
using,
true. Yep, mhm.
They're just using Chat GPT to help
Yep.
them answer their questions and
Yeah.
stuff.
I know. I think
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how education and, academic institutions evolve with AI and what that looks like, because I think there is value in AI and there's definitely benefits to it and how it's used. And I think AI in healthcare, there's some opportunities there to reach rural populations. And,
Yes, absolutely.
there's a lot of benefits. And, I don't want a surgeon who learned how to be a doctor
Right.
or
Online.
any profession. I mean, I don't want any profession to, have learned through just asking AI what the answer is to the question. And so I'm so curious to see how this evolves, because
Well, even cell phones did that.
Sure,
My youngest son cannot tell time if life depends on it, because all he does is look at the phone. You know
That
what I
was
mean?
the
He
biggest.
cannot-
They don't know how to read an analytical clock.
No, he cannot look at a clock and tell you what time it is, because he
Right.
never had to know.
It's
And it's like,
analog, not analytical. Sorry.
He just
Rita, can you read the time? Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
he
just had to
just-
check.
yes.
That's it. Just curious. Okay.
Yeah, he can't read the time because
Yep,
he
yep.
had a cell
Interesting.
phone to be able to be able to do it. And Gilbert is embracing it. They are embracing it for teachers and within the classroom. Again, because we have to evolve. You know
Right.
what
Sure,
I mean?
sure.
Unfortunately,
Of course,
we
yeah.
want to keep the good of the past, but we have to keep evolving. So,
Right.
And teach them how to use those tools appropriately
Right.
and how to what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. It goes back when I was in school, I had encyclopedias and how you can't just, copy
Britannica,
everything.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know. I think about library and when I learned like the Dewey Decimal System and things, I'm like, do they even do that anymore? Is
No.
that okay? I was just curious.
They also do. They still teach handwriting, cursive.
Yes, we do
We
teach
yes,
okay.
Harper's
okay.
learned cursive this year.
We,
Okay,
we
okay.
do teach handwriting.
Yes.
Gone a lot of those with like math. Math is a huge, that's that huge. Show me your work, and with all that Common Core and all that kickback.
That's hard for me. Like
exactly.
I struggle with that as a
I
parent.
stopped
and
helping my kids with math.
I
at, like,
struggle
second
with
grade.
that because it doesn't. To me, it doesn't make sense. And I'm like, it seems so much more complicated in my opinion. I don't know. Maybe it's easier, but it's trying to work with her on that is like, oh, I'm like, I'm the wrong person.
Same.
you
I
know?
just
Yes.
yeah.
My husband's an engineer, so he was horrible with it because he was very much, this is the answer,
Right.
but, and he just knew it, and that sort,
Right.
that thing. And it's a lot of show me the work, a lot of show me why, how did you get to that point? Even at the kindergarten level, it's a lot of, we show them pictures of, and talking about math in their environment, and how do you know there's 5 things in that picture, and then they have to be able to say, well, I counted 5, or teaching them how to kind of investigate and how they know that and show you those things. So for years, it was really difficult. And now, like, some of the kids don't know any different.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because that's the way
Yeah.
we've kind of taught them. For parents, it's always going to be difficult because we never learn that way. And it's like, just memorize it. You just know the answer.
Yeah.
It's like, just, why do we have to have all these lines going down to get that same number?
Right. That's how I feel
Personally,
about
I
it.
spent a lot of money on tutors.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah,
It is worth
it really,
is
and it
worth
also saved our relationship,
just gonna
our
say
mother-daughter
that.
relationship.
I
yeah.
agree. I agree. So, what are your thoughts on homework?
Twofold. Like I said, I think if it is intentional and practice or something that builds families together, that it's good. I want to teach kids. I want to have them for 7 hours of good, solid, working hard with them. When they go home, I want you to be able to take them to karate or take them to all those activities without having to come home and do something that is just a waste. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? That I just busy work because some parents said that they needed to have homework or something. There are certain things that a classroom of 20 kids that they just can't learn. They need that quiet at home kind of practice. Some of that is, if it's purposeful, it's helpful. So I go both ways. I feel both ways. We've always offer. At our grade level, I always offer some type of homework packet or something for those parents that, want it. Because like I said, there are parents who are so afraid that if they don't pass kindergarten, they're not going to make Harvard someday or Stanford.
It's
so
real.
true.
It is true.
And unless my child's sitting here for 2 hours when they get home, that they won't, they're not going to make it. I try to have it be, just a review of what we've already taught, because it's my job as the teacher to teach them it, But in the same sense, you would never know what the math looked like and why she's coming home or he's coming home crying and kicking and screaming. When you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh. Because so much more stuff is done online too.
Sure.
And especially at the high school level. Just go to Google Classroom, the assignment's on there, and now you get to do that. So all that like paper and pencil stuff is gone. So parents aren't getting the same kind of things home every day to kind of look and see what it is that they're doing.
Then parents are checking grades, and grades haven't been put in, and then
Exactly.
kids are getting in trouble because they have a lower grade than they think they do. I mean, it's a learning
vicious
curve.
circle.
Yeah.
It's a vicious, yes.
Yeah.
So I have always, I feel like I'm going to have to start evolving my stance on some of it, because I have taken the stance on, like, based on research, homework has not shown to a certain grade to be helpful,
It doesn't.
so
as teachers, I could say 90% of us don't even check it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm speaking on behalf of too many teachers. But, I mean, sometimes we are, or if they're struggling or we need some kind of intervention, we will go back and, see if they practice or whatever. It is more for the parent. And I mean, I'll be honest. There were times I sat and did my own kids' homework just to get it done.
Right.
I know every mom or dad out there can say that. I just know it.
And I get that everyone's not the same, and so for us in our house, it's what's important to me is that my kids are healthy, that they are mentally, emotionally, physically in a good space, and they are in school for 7 hours, my son isn't yet, but he will be, and so it's like when they get home from school, the last thing that for us that makes sense is to spend hours and also even arguing. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in doing that. So it's just not healthy for our family, in my opinion. And so I have taken the stance every year, and I say it at Meet the Teacher. I make it very clear where our family is and where we lie with homework. I'm sure there's going to be a teacher I run into eventually that is going to push back on my stance.
I know the upper grades, they're a little bit more, but
Right.
younger grades. And, like we said, we need to evolve too. There's more working
Right.
moms and dads. Moms aren't
Right.
waiting for them when they get home with their snack to do,
Right.
do a quick piece of homework before they go to ballet class.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Now, you're not even starting your time at home till 6 o'clock in some
Right.
cases.
Yeah.
And now, we
they're
want them to go out and be
tired.
kids. Like I just
Right.
said, my son only knew football. If we never took him to do karate or soccer or gymnastics or any of those other things after school,
Right.
he wouldn't have known what he was good at, what
Right.
kind of thing, where he wanted to go
Yeah.
and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see like how long it takes till I have like I think it's coming soon where I have the pushback at Meet the Teacher night where it's like, well, it's part of her grade. And then like, well, we're going to have to work something out. What does that look like? We're going to get there. But I'm curious. So, Cindy and I are therapists and, we've seen, the landscape evolve. But I'm curious from the kindergarten perspective in the classroom and with students, how have you seen mental health in your classroom change over the years?
It's significant. Like I said, it's twofold. It's the one that they come in and there's some that are super anxious. That anxiety is already within them.
Yeah.
You could almost see that. Undiagnosed OCD where they're erasing and they've got holes in their paper because they want it that perfection.
Yeah.
So that's coming from somewhere. Sometimes it's internal. I assume you guys are the other therapists, or it's coming from some outside outside source and getting those kind of kiddos to just, it's okay. Mistakes are good. That's how we learn. Seeing a lot more. Attention deficit disorder being diagnosed, a lot more of the autism surfacing and things like that. And sometimes we see that in kindergarten first because they haven't had that other kind of environment. In preschool, they've had lots of opportunities to move and go and play and things, and now they're in kindergarten. It's a different kind of environment. Although we're very developmental and purposeful, we do a sit-down activity, we do a dance, we do a game, we do, breaking up every 10 or 15 minutes based on developmentally what they're able to. You see, we have a lot more, and, I'm on a lot of teacher, different social media around the country. It's the same with everybody, where you see classrooms that are just destroyed by certain students who can't self-regulate or can't, they're throwing chairs they just don't, they haven't been taught those skills yet. They can't, parents don't understand it.
So how have you had to adjust? Like what have you had to do to help support the students?
It's a lot more monitoring, a lot more being honest and frank with parents.
Okay.
I think that helps. Parents, especially in kindergarten, sometimes you're the first person telling them, that, there might be something else going on here. I always liked, they're in kindergarten. This is the first place they've come to learn school. Some of them have never had any other experience. Some of them are only children and have no other brother or sister to have played with. So they don't even understand that you don't just go and take a toy and it's not just about me and that sort of thing. So it's looking at each child individually, understanding what circumstance they're coming from and being frank and open with the parents. And I usually say, we're going to watch this. Let's kind of watch it. Let's see where it goes.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Unapologetically Female. We hope you've loved the conversation so far. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. And be sure to come back next week for part 2.